J150 swath testing results are in. Now, I'm going to be going through a pretty in-depth dive into what the results are, but also how to read these, because we've been doing swath testing on every drone since the T30. So from the T10 to the T30 to the 40 to the 50, the J100 and the J150, and doing swath testing the same exact way. Now, I've gone through this in some of our previous videos about swath testing. I'm going to redo it. That way you guys know exactly what to look at whenever you're looking at these results, because we make them publicly available to you, so you make your own best decisions and best practices whenever you're doing application with every drone. And before I get started in that, I want to preface this by saying we got some of the best and also some of the worst swath out of the J150, and I'm going to show you why. And some of these are so good that it's hard to believe, but there's actually application data to back it up. So hang with me here. Let's go through this kind of one by one. If you skip the rest of the video and you want to know how to operate your J150, the one piece of advice I'll give you is run 4 nozzles no matter what application you're doing. That's going to be the best swath. All right, now let's get into this. So I'm going to pull up on my screen kind of how we conduct our swath testing, and then we'll look at the results and how to read a result. So you heard me say earlier when we were out in the field how the testing is done. So we spray a string with dye, and we spray that string 3 times in 3 separate sections. We spray it once, they reel it in, spray it again, they reel it in, spray it again, they reel it in. So it's 3 replications per test, and then they average those together. And as we look at our screen here that I have pulled up, you can see we do quite a bit of testing on every drone on the J150. We did 42 different tests. Why do we do 42 different tests? Now, this is not 42 different replications. This is 42 different tests as in changing a variable. Because when you change a variable, whether that be speed or height, number of nozzles, micron size, volume in the tank, or product, meaning adjuvant or just water, it's going to change the pattern on the drone. Because these drones don't have booms, obviously. So with the ground rig, if you have a 60-foot boom, it doesn't matter if you're going 5 miles an hour or 10 miles an hour, you still have a 60-foot swath. It doesn't matter if your droplets are 100 microns or 1,000 microns. You still have a 60-foot swath. With drones, everything matters. There are no booms. We rely on prop wash and vortex. So all of these variables that you see on the top of my screen here matter. These are the variables that we can change as an operator to change our pattern or change our swath. There are, of course, other variables: temperature, wind, humidity, altitude, perhaps. I mean, there are many variables that we can't change as operators, but at least knowing a starting point is good. And it's also important to note that swath is subjective, meaning that one person looks at the same result as you do, and they come up with a different conclusion as far as what they want to run from a route spacing or swath perspective. So here are the variables that we changed, and we try to change variables from drone to drone about the same way. Okay, so number of nozzles, application rate, mostly 2 gallons per acre, what we ran with the J150. Speed, height over the string, mostly 10 feet high. We put route spacing in here, but that's just a factor of your output. So if you're covering X amount of square feet per second at a certain rate, and then that X amount of square feet per second goes down, that's going to change your output as far as gallons per minute. And then micron size, of course, and right now the J150 is anywhere between 10 and 300 microns are the limitations there. We're going to be going higher than that. We just don't have the capabilities to do that right now as far as in these settings. We don't have micron testing back to show you what the actual microns are, unfortunately, at this point in time. So just swath is all we're going to be covering. And then we've got volume in the tank, which is a factor of downforce. The more weight the drone has, the more downforce it has, the more prop wash it has. And then we have adjuvant. So most of these tests are just running water, but some we ran air shocker, which is a guar-based DRA, or just drift-reducing agent. Basically to clump up those smaller microns or smaller droplets into large droplets and reduce that drift. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and pull up a test so you guys can see what that looks like and how to read these tests. We don't have the J150 test at this point in time as I talk about this right now pulled into like all in one document. They're all kind of separate right now. But I'll just pull one up so you can kind of see how to read these. So here's the J150 test. And what to pay attention to here is important. First off, the test number is on the top right, and you can look at the sheet here and see the test numbers. This is test number 33 that I have pulled up, and you can match that here to test number 33. And you can see this was done at 1 GPA, 45 feet per second, 12 feet high, 36-foot route spacing, 300 microns, 20 gallons in the tank with no adjuvant. It's very important to look at the test number and understand what the parameters are. And then when we look down here under the data, don't pay attention to the speed too much, because some of these are actually not reported correctly on this sheet. They're reported correctly on the spreadsheet though. The height should mostly be correct on here, and the wind should be correct, the wind velocity and crosswind. When it comes to wind with these tests, we try to remove that as a variable. We can't remove it 100%, of course, but we try to spray into the wind at all times. Agri Consulting has been doing our testing, so we've been working with the same company to do our Swath testing for the last 4 years now. They've been doing the Swath testing the same exact way, including trying to remove variables, meaning wind. So we try to fly into the wind. If the wind changes directions whenever we're doing our test, we change our line, that we're spraying on, to make sure that that is out of the question as a variable. So try to spray into the wind with low wind. But of course going to be some crosswind. This is reported live at the time of the application on the screen, on the string, I should say. And then if we look down here at the actual data, on this top you can see these are these lines here on this top graph. Those are the individual applications, individual replications. So we have 3 replications usually on each test. Sometimes just 2 because one was just way off. Maybe it was a crosswind or something like that that kicked up and threw it off. So we at least have 2, but in most cases we'll have 3 replications. And this is the concentration of the dye on the string. They use a spectrometer to read the amount of dye on the string. So it's about a 70-foot string, and then they run it through the spectrometer, and that reads the concentration from left to center to right of that application line. So it's just one pass, it's not 2 passes. And then this green line here is the average of those 3 lines. So take all the 3 of these up here, average them together, and this is what you would get as far as the concentration. And every test is going to look pretty similar. You're going to see most of the application happening under the drone. So here's the center line of the drone right here. We may be off a little bit left or right as we're flying over that center line. That's just a factor of operation. You can't control it 100%. But you can see most of the applications under the drone, and it tapers off in a bell curve as it goes left and right, with some anomalies, sometimes some humps here and there. But it should be a pretty standard bell curve. And the more gradual of a curve it is, typically the better results that you have. Now this is why Swath is subjective, because it's all about overlap. We need overlap. We need some drift out of drones to actually get uniform application. We call that overlap, because you can see that here represented in this box on this green line graph here, where you have a square or a rectangle marked out, and this one's marked out at 36 feet. And it's not telling you that 36 feet is the swath that you should run with this particular test. This is just showing you what a 36-foot swath would look like with your overlaps if you were to run that. Because outside at 36 feet left and right, we obviously have application, we have drift, we have overlap. And then down on the bottom charts here, this shows you a visual representation of what the overlap would look like if you were to run 36 feet in this case. And this racetrack style right here, it says racetrack and back and forth. Don't pay too much attention to racetrack, because that's if you're running the same direction multiple times. So if you're spraying north and then north again on the very next pass. Now, of course, this does happen when it comes to the flight efficiency that all of these drones have now, where you'll end up on the other side of the field, the wrong side of the field, fly back empty, then you'll spray the same direction down again. So this could happen to you, but in most cases, most of your passes are back and forth. So this bottom one is typically what you want to look at. And then this is representing on these two charts here what a 36-foot swath pattern would look like, with the pink and the yellow being your overlaps, meaning being these parts here on the left and right outside of 36 foot. So you can see the green line within that 36 foot is represented here, and then the pink and the yellow is here and here, flopping up over onto the next pass. And these charts are nice as a visual, but what the important data to look at really is the chart in the bottom right corner of each one of these PDFs, which is going to be the actual numbers, the percentages, your CV or your variation. So you want as little variation as possible to get the most uniform swath and reduced streaking. And these numbers don't tell you anything in and of themselves unless you know kind of, how much variation you want. And according to Agri Consulting, who's been doing aerial application pattern testing for, at this point, decades now, and does it many, many times throughout the year with not just drones now, but also previously to drones, helicopters, and airplanes. They say anything below 20% is considered acceptable. Anything below 15% variation is considered good. And you can see in this test here, this is why I say we got some of the worst pattern testing out of the J150 as well as some of the best, is because we've got at 36 feet, 34%, and at even 27, 21%. So it's not considered acceptable anywhere here. Maybe 26 feet is considered acceptable on this particular parameter set. Okay, I think that was enough detail for you guys to understand how to read these results now. Now let's jump into actually looking at some of the tests between the 150 different parameters and the 150 compared to other drones that we've tested, because again, we've done this for 4 years now on every drone model. Okay, there's a lot more data to go through here, so let me just clear my head and think where to start. Okay, first I'll start with the number of nozzles and how that affects the pattern on the 150. Now this is what really surprised me and why I said to run 4 nozzles on the 150. We were thinking whenever we did pattern testing, most of this pattern testing was done at a 2-gallon rate, some at 5 and some at 3, some at 10, but most at 2, because that's what the vast majority of operators run, is a 2-gallon rate. So try to simulate what you're going to be running in the field. We thought a 2-gallon rate, low flow out of the drone, 2 nozzles is better than 4 because it reduces that concentration under the drone, right? It gets it to the outside of the drone and it can spread out further. That's not the case. Let me show you exactly what I mean. So we'll look at test number 1 here, which was 2 nozzles at 45 feet per second, 10 feet high, 300 microns, 10 gallons in the tank, so about half full tank. And we'll pull that test number 1 up here on the screen. And here you can see that the raw data. And again, I'm just going to go down here to the bottom right corner. So this is, again, that what I just talked about in the parameters. And we don't get to an acceptable swath until 30 feet is at 20%. And maybe that sounds good to you. To me, it does not sound good, especially with a big drone. With a big drone, you want a big swath, right, to empty out that tank faster and to cover more ground, right? And so I was pretty disappointed when I saw this, and we can pull up, we did this same test at 45 feet per second, 32 and 23, and that's these top 3 right here, test 1, 2, and 3. And this wasn't an anomaly, it was pretty consistent. So this is a bit slower, and again, we're even worse on this one at a bit slower speed. This is a bit slower yet, a bit better actually, surprisingly, which is another interesting thing, because we'll compare this to the T40. Then that's what many people are familiar with, is the T40 and 50, the same airframe, the same nozzle structure essentially, and the same prop wash and vortex characteristics. And we have better testing on the T40. So when we look at the T40, we'll look at this top one here, which is the most similar to what we just looked at with the J150. 32 feet per second. We'll look at the first two, 32 and 23 feet per second, 300 microns, 5 gallons, just half full tank, just running water in the tank. Some of the reporting as far as how we report the tests may look different from model to model, but how the tests are actually done is all the same. And then we'll pull up our actual test. Here's this test number 1 on the T40, and you can see at 32 feet we've got 14%. Even at 36 feet, we're still better than the 150 was. Test number 2, again, still better than the 150 was. Lower CV is what we're looking for, and that's what we got. And the other interesting thing here is not only was the T40 better, T50 better with the 2 nozzle configuration compared to the J150 2 nozzle configuration, but the T40 and T50, they actually lose swath when you slow down a little bit. They lose, swath, which is what you'd expect, lose it more so than what the 150 did. We look back at the 150, as we slow down, there again, this is 23 feet per second, it seems like we actually stay pretty consistent, if not get better, in terms of our pattern, which is very interesting, something that we did not expect either. Okay, now let's jump into what impressed me and what I still am a bit in disbelief of, which is the 4-nozzle testing on the J150. So you can see here most of these are at 2, and they all look pretty similar to what I showed you on the J150 already. And then we have these here that are at 4. And so we'll look at test number 21 first. So here's test number 21, which is the same, if we look at the parameter set, the same as test number 1 that we just looked at. So 2 GPa, 45 feet per second, 10 feet high, 300 microns. And again, we did this at 45 and 32, so we'll look at test number 21 and 22. That'll compare to test number 1 and 2 on the J150. And test number 21 shows us that at 36 feet we have 16%. That is a huge change compared to the 4-nozzle. You can even see our bell curve looks a lot more gradual. Even it's not as wide overall, but it's more gradual in terms of the bell curve. And so you get down to 34 feet and you have a good CV, acceptable all the way up to 39 feet. We saw this first one and we thought this was an anomaly. So here's test number 22, which is the same thing, just a bit slower at 32 feet per second. And again, even better CV. 36 feet is 11%. That's excellent. And acceptable all the way out to 43 feet. This was shocking to us. 4 nozzles I would not think would have done this. And again, we go forward and we look at test number 23 through 27, which is different microns and different volumes as far as application rates. And every test with 4 nozzles looks just like this, if not better. We'll pull up the next one here. This is 45 feet per second at 100 microns instead of 300 microns, and extremely good. 8% CV at 45 feet, which is insane. Never seen any drone do this, period. Even at, if we go back to our T40 pattern testing, we did 150 microns right here. We had to run a bit slower on the T40 because, here we go. Yeah, because it's capped at 32, but 150 microns is test number 3 on the T40. And if I pull that up, you can see we're acceptable to 31 feet, and we're good at 28 feet. Exact opposite with the J150. If we look at more tests than 150, here's test number 24. Look at this. It's not just about your swath width, but consistency. Consistency from replication to replication is phenomenal, pass to pass. And again, 100 microns, 45 feet per second at a 45-foot swath, a 9% CV. Again, excellent CV. Moving on to test number 25, which is, again, 4 nozzles. I think this one's 5 gallons per acre, 40 feet, excellent CV. And again, test number 26, which I think is 5 gallons per acre also. And here at 36 feet, we're acceptable. This is the weird thing about some of these tests, because you're going to see kind of that sweet spot. We go too narrow and our CV actually increases. So somewhere in here, that 37, 38 feet with this 4 nozzle set on that pattern test is going to be the sweet spot. And I think one more, test number 27. Right here, again 5 GPA with 20 gallons in the tank this time, and again excellent CV at 36 feet all the way out to 40 feet, all the way out to really actually 43 feet. So you saw every one of those tests that we did at 4 nozzles, and extremely consistent as far as having a good CV at a wide swath. So it's not an anomaly. This is not an anomaly in one test to another. This is a real thing. Now, every time we do pattern testing, I think to myself, we have to retest because there's something I don't understand. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? Especially in this case. But whenever we've done multiple replications at 4 nozzles, there's got to be something to this. And I didn't believe this until we talked to operators, some of our people that were running the J150, our testers in the field. And we had guys spraying herbicide at 36 feet. We had guys spraying fungicide at 40 feet. And when I talked to one operator in particular, he said he didn't see any streaking, he didn't have any dead or live weeds after 36-foot application of herbicide. And he had neighbors. One guy had a nozzle. He would have seen that because he had a neighbor that had a nozzle problem on a J100 on one field, and it shut off on part of the field, and he saw streaking in his fungicide. So he would have seen that if it would have happened. And so far he hasn't seen that, which tells us that maybe this pattern testing is accurate. Now, of course, there's going to be, wind anomalies you have to account for. If you're flying, with a 10-mile-an-hour wind, how is that going to affect your pattern? It's going to blow it one way or another. So if you're flying with the wind, it's always best to fly crossways, but that's still going to affect your pattern, and it's not going to look like this. And of course, you have to take all this with a caveat. We're spraying a string, right? That's pretty small. So it's one little spot in the swath. This is an actual crop, in-crop pattern testing. We do this type of pattern testing, string testing, so we can replicate 42 different tests within one day, and then we can do field testing from there. Okay. All right. Now, a couple other things to probably, look at when you're looking at this pattern testing is going to be what the adjuvant has an effect compared to water, and what the weight of the drone has an effect. Weight of the drone is not something that you can really keep constant, because obviously you're discharging that weight as you spray. You're going from 16 or 20 gallons down to 0. But we did that testing here at 1 gallon, at 10 gallon, and at 20 gallon. So find these that have replicated parameters and compare those to these. Now, unfortunately, a lot of our replications with our adjuvant or with our volume in the tank are at 2 nozzles, not 4. So it's not going to be a super accurate representation of what we think you should run, but at least it's something, a baseline to start with. And we'll be doing more pattern testing, because seeing these results was pretty remarkable to us. Actually, whenever the Agri Spray Consulting was running the tests, it's a husband and wife team, and he was running the tests that, these 2 nozzle tests. And he was thinking to himself, he told me this, these are the worst pattern tests I've ever seen in my life, compared to this big of a drone. And she was starting with these 4 nozzle tests, and she was saying, these are the best pattern tests that I've ever seen with my life. So they actually switched spools, and they reran the tests. They have 2 separate machines, because they thought their machines were messed up. So they reran the tests, and they got the same results both times. And then check out air shocker as well. Adjuvants, very, very important to have in your drones. And you'll see there are some anomalies here that you'll see on a couple of these, but for the most part, you're going to see a more consistent pattern. If you look at this test number 39, for example, that's going to show a more consistent pattern than that first test that we showed you right here. We have acceptable swath at 36 feet right there, but of course there are anomalies here when you look at, kind of that CV on the right-hand side never gets below 15 because of these weird humps in here. Okay. I think I covered about everything. It would take me about 5 hours to go through each one of these tests. I'm not going to do that, but we'll have these live on our Knowledge Hub, and we'll have these in a very usable format and I'll show you how to get to them. If we go to our website here, agrispraydrones.com, and then go to Resources on the top and Knowledge Hub, we post hundreds of articles in here every year, on the DJI and EAV system both, as well as our other products, troubleshooting guides, everything like that. It's going to live underneath the J150 tab here, but if you just search Swath right here, then you'll see it pop up in here. It'll say J150 Swath testing, and it'll look a lot like our J100 Swath testing that we've got here, where you can actually click to see the full table, as well as a link to each one of the individual test results on the right-hand side. We don't want to tell you what swath you should run, what route spacing you should run. That's not our job. This is your drone. The reason you get a drone is to do things how you want, when you want, where you want. And that includes setting the parameters that you want, including swath. So we want to make sure that you make your own decisions on this. And if you have any questions, we're always here to help. And we'll be bringing you guys more results in the near future. All right. Thanks. See ya.